Hello and a very warm welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Humor. This is mini episode 19. Many thanks for joining us. As always, shout out to our new listeners. There's been a ton in May. Welcome aboard. I highly encourage you to check out our webpage, surprisingly called the Internet of Things Made Simple.com, which has some great material like ebooks, blog posts, and more, in addition to links to all the previous podcasts. And I humbly ask two things. First, please subscribe to this podcast using your favorite podcast service, which we're now on over 24, and I'm not going to list them all, but it's ones like Apple, Google, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, you name it. And if you happen to listen to us using Apple's podcast service or iTunes, I would very much love for you to leave a short review of the show, preferably positive, but just tell us what you think anyways. In this episode, we are going to look at the concept of value, in that it's not always how much you spend up front on something, but rather how much value you get for your money over time. As someone who grew up in a home where wasting things was extremely frowned upon, if you've ever seen the old TV show with Chris Rock called Everyone Hates Chris, where the dad knew the value of absolutely everything, that's my house now and my house growing up. I do appreciate finding any way that I can to both extend the life of something and to maintain it properly to reduce costly repairs as much as possible. As an example, I do what I can to keep my home and cars working properly to ensure they have a long life and don't have expensive downtime. However, as frugal as I am, I truly understand the concept of you get what you pay for. Buying an inferior product might seem like a great bargain up front, but in many cases, it can cost you more over time. Sure, you may be able to replace the lower cost item once or even twice and still be ahead of what you would have spent up front on a more expensive one. But what about the cost of your time, and what about the cost of lost productivity and frustration? When you factor in the overall cost of ownership of a product, meaning how much will it cost you over the expected life of a good product versus what you might have paid over the same time period if you use a cheaper one, in many cases, it's cheaper to spend more up front. This is truly the case in the world of cellular routers or gateways. In the remainder of this episode, we're going to cover 5 reasons why, in many cases, it's cheaper in the long run to spend $1,000 on a cellular gateway up front than to spend $300. Now on to the first reason. A more expensive gateway can often eliminate the need for at least one other product on site, and often as many as 3 other ones, if you can believe it. Think of a remote location that wants to gain the power of IoT. Maybe you can't imagine it. I'm going to help you out. We're going to use a remote pump station as the example. Well, just about any cellular gateway can provide the level of communication you need. It's a paperweight if you don't gather all the information on the site. To do this, you might use other devices, like an RTU, which is a device that's basically a high-end computer for easy purposes. It's more than that, but let's just leave it at that. And you might use counters to keep track of things like how many times a door is opened. Increasingly, the more advanced cellular gateways both have the ability to gather information and to run applications on board that could replace the counter and the RTU. For the third device, you have to look at the importance of securing IoT devices. Consider the importance of these key devices in the field. So think traffic light controllers I've mentioned before, a pipeline, a furnace at a remote location or at a building. And that's just 3 examples. Companies have often taken security precautions, and rightly so, to keep these devices safe. In many cases, this involves deploying an enterprise-grade router, so think Cisco or Fortinet or Juniper, on site to work alongside the cellular gateway. Most advanced cellular routers or gateways now easily have the security prowess to allow companies to skip that enterprise-grade router, and this can significantly lower down your cost at a site. And that kind of leads to our second point, better overall security when using a better product. Maybe you weren't going to use an enterprise-grade router at your site, as I mentioned in the last point. Regardless, securing your devices and your data is not an option. It is very important to any or all organizations, or at least it frickin' should be. More advanced modems and routers offer many features that allow companies to keep things safe, and here's just a few examples. ACL, or Access Control List, not the ligament you blow out playing football, reduces the chance of unauthorized remote devices making changes to your device by restricting the IP range that can make changes. The second one is some of them are starting to offer signed firmware. And no, this is not like a signed autograph. This means that there's an algorithm that's done to ensure that the file being sent up to the device is not corrupt or is not malware that's able to do damage to the device. The third way is the ability to establish VPN or virtual private network tunnels from the gateway to the server. Now, this is not totally new, but higher-end devices use much higher encryption levels, as well as the ability to handle multiple tunnels at once. And if you're kind of wondering what's a VPN, just think when you see that little lock on your browser when you're browsing your financial page or anything else, that means that the transmission going back and forth is encrypted. Same idea here. Again, it's more than that, but let's just keep it non-nerdy. And speaking of non-nerdy, I'm going to avoid as much nerdiness on this last one just by saying higher-end gateways increase the security level for local area networks. So if you offer Wi-Fi, for instance, on a site, that's more secure now. Having better security might not necessarily save you money, but it does prevent unwanted hacks that could end up costing your company many times more than the cost of the gateway, both in lost revenue and in people thinking bad about your company. On to the third point, which is future expandability. And by the way, I just say it like 4 times and edit it out. So expandability. Quick, how many times do you know exactly what you might want or need on anything in 2, 5, or even 10 years? The answer, if it's truthfully, is you usually don't. Things change. You might think that, I'll never need Wi-Fi at a site. As I'm only wiring in a couple of remote assets, I don't need to spend money on Wi-Fi for that router. And then decide to add a new device that only communicates via Wi-Fi 2 years later. The same goes for Ethernet. Yes, the cable is not dead. You might think that, one port's enough, until your boss comes to you demanding to put a video camera to see what's going on at the site. How do you provide internet access when your other Ethernet port is already used and it doesn't allow Wi-Fi? No gateway could ever have the answer to everything you might need. Higher-end ones often come with 2 different things that might help you here. Quite simply, they come with more ports and faster speeds on their Wi-Fi connections. This allows you to connect extra devices via wired or wireless as you might need. Second, they often come with the option of expandability. Again, there's that word I can't say. Many devices offer the ability to add on expansion cards after purchase, allowing you to add things like Wi-Fi or an extra port for your boss's newest idea. This would mean that you wouldn't have to replace or upgrade devices quite as often, and you can get more out of them for longer. The fourth point, speaking of longer, is they last longer and they're more reliable. You kind of would expect that, as they might cost 2, 3, 5 times more than an inferior product. However, people don't really factor this into their decision very often. Most devices or sites that you want to communicate with using cellular gateways have a long life on them. If you're an electric company, traffic light company or city, or you have a new store, you're probably not planning on that thing going away in 2 years. It's going to be there for a while, often a decade or more. Many enterprise-grade routers, especially if you buy them on the latest cellular network, have expected life of a decade or more in the field, whereas you might have to buy 2 to 3 inferior ones in the same time period. This, of course, if you do the quick math, can often easily justify the upfront investment on its own, but there is a much more potentially important factor here. Lower cost gateways usually have more issues, even when they don't fail, and there's a cost to that. Think about a gateway going offline and you're not able to bring it back online easy. What's your cost to getting out there to fix that? What about downtime? Maybe you lost sales, productivity, or you lost different other ways because the machines aren't running. And does that lack of communication potentially cause safety issues if you're using that for work-alone solutions for your team and for your customers? There are some great return on investment tools that can show you what 1 hour, 2 hour, or more of downtime per year could cost, which is not unheard of and often much more for inferior gateways, can cost your business multiple times more than the cost of an expensive high-end gateway each year. The final one goes hand in hand with point number 4 about downtime, and that's how higher-end gateways or routers have a lower overall support cost and allow your very much overworked IT teams to do much more over the air, preventing on-site visits. If you have a single gateway and it's deployed about as far away from your desk as the office coffee maker, you might not consider this to be an issue. You can perform all updates locally by attaching the wire or Wi-Fi, and you can just hit the reset button on the way for your fourth cup of coffee. Hey, no judging. We all drink a little too much, I think, some days. That's not usually the case for most IoT devices. You may have hundreds or thousands of them, and maybe they're located all across the country or even the world. The idea of getting out there and hitting a reset button is not really appealing. The more advanced gateways offer some incredible tools to allow you to look after your devices. Need to change the frequency, how often your 1,000 devices report? Do it with a few clicks. Need to apply a new firmware update or security setting? Just as easy. As well, some organizations do not allow things to be hosted in the cloud. Think police forces, utility companies. Not to worry, most of the advanced products have software that can be hosted by the client in their location or in their network. Sure, to be clear, these software upgrades or offerings are not usually free, but they are available on higher-end gateways, something that they're not even available on lower-cost ones. And as the number of devices increases, and the distance away from you does as well, the low cost of these management tools is very easy to justify. To recap, higher-end gateways no doubt cost more upfront. They are higher-end, but they're almost always going to have a lower cost of ownership over a 5 and especially a 10-year period. They do this in 5 ways. 1, they replace other pieces of equipment, like counters, RTUs, and enterprise routers. 2, they lower down the chance of security issues, reducing the cost of a security breach. 3, they offer an increased level of expandability. Again, there's that great word, which can prevent you from needing to prematurely replace or upgrade a device. 4, they go down less, saving you costly downtime. And 5, they're easier to support, reducing your support burden. When you factor all of these things in, very often it's truly cheaper to spend $1,000 than to spend $300. Some of you will not agree with this, and I still want to hear from you anyways. Start with our Facebook page, The Internet of Things Made Simple. Again, surprise, which has not only links to our podcast, but also other material. If we're connected on LinkedIn, that's a good place to start. Drop me a note there. And if we're personally connected, drop me an email or text. Love to hear from you. I'm Larry Bohumer. Take care.